Evening and welcome to tonight's Common Council meeting for August 8th, 2023. Clerk will call the roll, please.
Herman.
Here.
Matsdorf. Here. Gilson.
Here.
Hildebrand.
Here.
Penkwitz.
Here.
Shilsky.
Present.
Nelson.
Here.
Tauschek.
Let the record show I have a quorum. Next is the pledge. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item is the consent agenda. The chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please, Anna.
Nelson.
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Yes.
Matsdorf.
Yes.
Penkwitz.
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
Shilsky.
Yes.
Gilson.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. Next is the audience portion where we ask people to sign in and be recognized. That's when you do the talking and we do the listening. Tonight, no one signed in. We do encourage people to come forward and talk to us. Item 5 is not needed. No items were removed from the consent agenda. And I think we'll interrupt the proceedings at this point. Tim, you have an announcement tonight?
Sure, I just wanted to welcome Paul Seymour, who's our new city treasurer and deputy clerk. So welcome Paul to the team. He just started on Monday and he's come back for day 2. So I think that's a success.
Can't be all bad, right? Well, welcome Paul. And Paul is at City Hall.
City Hall, yep.
Okay, good. Thank you. Welcome. Moving on to item 6, new business. Tonight we have the 2022 audit presentation report, and I'll turn it over to Tim. And Tim, go ahead and introduce our audit team.
Sure, so this is just going to be a brief introduction by myself. The city and utility continue to be in solid financial shape, the year ending 12/31/22. So tonight we have Baker Tilly, Amanda, and Aaron, who are our audit presenters tonight. So they're going to run through the audit and happy to answer any questions. Our interim finance director, Chris Russo, is here tonight as well to answer questions if they come up.
Good. Welcome, Aaron. Amber, Amanda, thank you very much. And it's good to see you again, even if it's long distance. So tell us how good we are.
Great. I will get that started. My name is Amanda Bloomberg with Baker Tilly. I is the city on the side of the audit, so that's what I will be speaking about. And we do appreciate accommodating the remote meeting attendance.
Amanda and Aaron, can you guys turn off your camera? I think we're getting some bandwidth issues. Sorry about that.
Oh. All right, is that better?
A little bit, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Well, if you have any questions as we go through here, or interrupt me if I'm breaking it off. All right. So what I'm going to start with, like I mentioned, is kind of the city side of things. We did send a set of financial statements along with some graphs. Is that something that you have in front of you?
Yes.
Or do you want me to present that? Oh.
Nope, we have that.
Okay, so we'll start. So what I'm going to start with is that graph packet, and this really just keys in on some of the important financial information as it relates to the city's funding. We really key in. So if you turn to page 1 of that, it's like 4 pages. You'll see one that is the city of Plymouth and one from the utilities. I'm going to be starting with the city of Plymouth. We're having a name on the front, and then page 1 talks about the city of Plymouth and all fund results. So we want to have
Yep, we've got that.
Okay, great. All right, so we're gonna start talking about the general fund balance. And so we focus on the general fund because that's the main operating fund of the city. That's where a majority of the tax money goes. Much of the operations of the city are reported here, on utility related, of course. And so then we look at the actual fund balance of the general fund. And so the fund balance is essentially the equity, it's your assets minus your liabilities in this particular fund. General or fund balance in governmental funds can be broken down into different categories, and you'll see those at the bottom of page 1. Those are the definitions, and we'll talk about those a little bit as we look over the data in the graph. The actual revenues minus expenditures of the general fund were budgeted to be even. You'll see that in the table in the middle of page 1 there, where you'll see a final budget was intended to be completely balanced, which is normal. The actual results were about a $15,000 to $16,000 decrease in fund balance. That just means that expenditures exceeded revenues by about $16,000 in 22, which is actually, given the scope of the totals that we're dealing with, it is not too far off from your budget. So when we look at your fund balance in total, so that top bar in that graph on page 1 shows the decrease of your fund balance of that $15,683. The components of your fund balance move in relation to different items that make up those amounts. So we'll start with a non-spendable fund balance, which is at the bottom of this graph. Non-spendable fund balance really represents reserves or equity that is not able to be liquidated. You've already spent the money, or it's tied up in long-term type assets. In this case, you'll see that non-spendable decreased by about $70,000 in 22, which actually is good because the more money we have tied up in non-spendable, the less we have available to spend. And the reason for that is much of the balance is tied up in advances to TIF 6. That's pretty typical as new TIFs get off the ground. Some of the initial costs are funded by the general fund prior to that generating some increment. As that increment is generated, those advances get repaid. So in this case, of the $126,000 in non-spendable, we have about $40,000 in prepaid expenses. Money already out the door for 23 expenses, and then about $84,000 in advance to fix it. If we move up the chart, the next category that we have an amount in, actually go back to page 1. Assigned fund balance represents fund balance that is spendable, but it's spent earmarked for a specific purpose. In this case, the payment with tax that comes to the general fund from the water and light utilities are intended kind of like your budget to be used in the 23 budget. So basically it's just earmarked for usage in the next fiscal year. The pilot really varies from year to year just depending on valuation and assessment ratios and so forth. So that total went down to about $686,000 this year compared to $771,000 last year. So what that then does is when these two categories go down, your unassigned fund balance actually goes up by quite a bit. In this case, in 22, the unassigned fund balance increased by about $137,000. Even though your total went down by $16,000, what I'll say is the good part of your fund balance, or the best part of your fund balance, is the unassigned, because totally free and available to be used to pay your current bills. The fact that that went up 537,000 is actually a very positive thing. Any questions on that so far?
No, that's fine.
Okay, we move to the next page, on page 2. Here's a trending of the fund balance for the general fund over the last 5 years, and you'll see that red line there represents the assigned and unassigned portion of your fund balance in comparison with your annual expenditures in the general fund, or your budgeted expenditures in your case. The goal of the city is to have this within a range of about 20 to 25%, and you'll see that the city's been above that range. In 20 and 21, it was above that range by just a little bit, but increased quite a bit due to that increase in unassigned fund balance in 22. So you're up around that 40% mark, which you'll see those blue dots on this graph. Those are just benchmarks of kind of where the average lies for other municipalities of your size in Wisconsin. So you're in good company. You've increased that fund balance that's available to be used in the future. You're a little bit over what your goal is, but certainly not a bad place to be. It gives you a little bit more flexibility moving forward to potentially use that for a specific purpose. Any questions on fund balance?
No.
All right. I'm going to turn to page 3. 3 and 4 talk about general obligation debt. So general obligation debt is secured by the tax levy. There's a statutory limitation as to how much general obligation debt can be outstanding. You'll see on this chart here, the black line is the amount of that limitation. So that equals 5% of the city's equalized value. So that figure goes up over the course of time as that equalized value also goes up. The red line shows the actual amount of geo debt outstanding over the course of those last 4 years. In 2022, it was $12,325,000. About 5.4 million of that is related to the 50, and about 6.9 million of that is related to utilities, and a lot of that was actually borrowed to fund some of the test projects. Currently the city is at about 26% of the debt limit, or of the statutory debt limit, and anything under 50%, you're in really good shape. We see a lot of our growing communities even well over that 50% when they have active TIF districts or some developments going on. But given that your ratio is well under that 50% at 26% and has been pretty low, over these last few years. Again, no concerns here as far as how much debt is actually outstanding. If you go to the last page. This chart just takes a look at what the annual debt payments are in comparison to your annual expenditures. So page 4, if you move to that page, indicates the green line here indicates kind of what that ratio has been over the last 4 years. And so you'll see that you're hovering right between 17 to 20%. 20% is kind of, I won't call it a maximum, but it's a good benchmark to just be aware of that. As long, if you're under or right around that 20%, not a problem. It doesn't really cause any concern for anyone outside the city reading the statement. Again, some of my growing communities are well over that 20%. But again, not a concern in your case. If you have a lot of, that is being repaid by your TIF districts or the utility funds and not a lot of, it's not necessary to draw a lot on the tax levy to repay that debt. So again, sitting pretty good at that 20% mark or under. That really wraps up the financial information I wanted to share as far as the city is concerned. Does anyone have any questions for me?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Okay. All right, well, thanks for having me. I'll turn it over to Aaron to talk about the utilities.
Thanks,
Thank-
Amanda.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Aaron Worthman, partner in charge of the utilities engagement, and pleased to report on the utility-specific results. If you can scroll down to the first utility slide that we have. Right there, perfect. Where we normally start is when we take a look at the utility results, I'd like to start with the sales for the three utilities. So similar to prior years, we've included graphs relative to the 5-year trend of sales for the utilities. So if we look at over the last 5 years, I'd say the sales have been pretty consistent. I'd say the growth in your communities have been offset by conservation efforts, so we haven't really seen a lot of major changes in your overall sales in electric. So for 2022, you had 264 million electric kilowatt hours sold, which is down slightly from the prior year, which was 266 million kilowatt hours sold. I'd say that the biggest driver of that is you had a little bit of decrease in your commercial and industrial, but for the most part, the other customer classes stayed the same. So good, consistent sales for electric. Next slide, please. So if we look at the water utility, same type of thing, but I will say, as we've noticed and we've discussed in prior years, that it's really the water utility that's really seen changes due to conservation efforts. And I think this 5-year trend shows that. For instance, if we go back all the way to 2018, we had 361 million gallons of water sold. In 2022, 5 years later, that number is significantly decreased to 346 million gallons sold. But again, most of that is due to conservation efforts for those 5 years. But we'll also see a significant decrease from 2021 to 2022. In 2021, we had 360 million gallons sold. So 2022 was a smaller sales year, if you will, just due to weather patterns and whatnot. Next slide. And then when we look at the sewer utility, now normally we would expect to see water and sewer sales follow in tandem. So when water goes up, we would see the sewer. However, Plymouth, as you know, has a number of sewer deduct meters. So if there's water waterings or water-only customers, that really has a major effect. So when we take a look at sewer, you'll see that we had a significant increase in 2022. So in 2021, we had 308 million gallons of wastewater treated, which increased substantially in 2022 to 339 million gallons wastewater treated. The biggest driver of that was in your industrial class, and that's normally where we see that volatility is within that customer class. Next slide, please. So the other thing we like to do is talk about the adequacy of your rates. So as we've talked about before, the Public Service Commission authorizes your rate return for your electric utility and your water utility. So those rates are based on your net investment rate base, which is your plant, your accumulated depreciation, the contributions towards those plant facilities, and then also taking into consideration your operating results, your operating income. So over the last 5 years, your electric utility has an authorized rate of return of 5.3%, and based on your current earnings in 2022, your actual return is slightly under that at 3.07. But that's an increase of the actual return from 2021 at 2.75. Now, I think I've expressed this in years past, but you definitely want to keep a close eye on that actual return. I would say you probably want to reach out to WPPI to see what the adequacy of those proposed, what your forecasted rates may be in 2023, to see if you do in fact need to start thinking about taking a look at an electric rate increase. And just for discussion purposes, the last time you folks raised your electric rates were in May of 2015. So your community's done a very good job of keeping your electric rates consistent, and it's been quite some time since you had a rate increase. But that's one thing you probably want to discuss with WPPI and may consider. Next slide, please. So if you take a look at the water utility in concept, authorized by the PSC, and your authorized rate of return for your water utility is 6%. Your actual return on those rates in 2022, you saw a decrease from 2021 from a little over 4% down to 3.77%. Again, you've been monitoring these rates, and in fact, your water rates were increased by an inflationary increase of 3%, effective in February of 2022. And also, you also filed for another simplified rate increase in April of 2023 for 4.5%. So the thinking is that with this new inflationary increase, your rate of return going forward into 2023 should be higher than the 3.77, get you closer to that 6%. But long and short, as your utilities, you've always done a good job maintaining your rates and keeping those current. Next slide, please. So we talked a little bit about sales. We talked about your rate of return, the adequacy of rates. Well, one thing that we always need to look at is your unrestricted funds on hand, or if you will, we always heard the line, cash is king. So you always want to make sure that you examine and take a look at your unrestricted cash position. Now, there's many different benchmarks you will hear when it comes to, what's an adequate unrestricted cash position to have at year end. But one of the things that we do is we look at that position relative to your months of operating revenue. So what we like to see is, I always like to state, you should probably have about 3 months worth of operating revenues, or 3 months worth of utility billings on hand, in addition to roughly 1 year's worth of routine capital additions. I'd say that's a pretty conservative number there, which means it's a healthy number. Good news is, when we look at 2021, we had about 6.6 months of billings on hand in unrestricted cash. That's increased to 9 months of unrestricted cash on hand, which is great. That's a great position. So I think if we take a look at your rates and then your overall cash unrestricted position, I'd say your utilities are very healthy. Next slide, please. And then the last thing that we look at is we look at your debt position. Amanda touched on this a little bit with your GO debt. When we look at your utilities debt position, that's all debt. That would be your revenue bonds and any GO bonds that we have. You'll see that if we compare your capital assets, what this shows is the percentage of those capital assets that in essence have been paid off, that have no more remaining debt. And that's roughly 89% this year. So as Amanda had mentioned earlier, we definitely want to make sure that number stays above 50%, that you basically have more than 50% of your plant infrastructure is debt-free. What this tells us is a couple things. It could mean that your infrastructure is aging and you have a lot of repairs that you need to do, which I don't think is the case in the terms of Plymouth. But what it does do is it does show that you do have capacity to take on additional debt and additional borrowing for any future CapEx projects. So again, that position is very good. So then lastly, if we look at the utilities as a whole, I'd say overall the health of your utilities is good. And you maintain a healthy utility, you monitor the rates, you're definitely sitting with a strong, definitely a strong debt position, so you have capacity to borrow. And looking forward to future growth, your utilities are poised to do that. But with that, any questions you have specific to the utility results?
I don't see any questions here, Aaron. I guess relative to what you commented on, for city and utility our size, how do we rank with comparable units that are similar.
Sure, sure, and I can speak from the utilities. I'd say one of the things that struck me was when I looked at your electric utility and hadn't seen a rate increase since 2015. I'd say that's good. Most utilities have more substantial rate increases and more frequent. You've done a good job there of keeping those. I'd say you're also, you definitely monitor those rates. You file and use the simplified rate increase when you're able to do so and keep those rates current. So again, I'd say that's at the top of the other utilities. So I'd say overall, when we look at your financial results, I'd say they're definitely in the top, you're definitely in the top 30% of what I've seen. I've seen some communities that don't do that. I've seen them where, because the public doesn't like rate increases, their cash position, they may have a deficit cash position, they may have issues paying their debt off. I'd say it's the exception, not the norm, but there's some communities I've seen that, are close to a going concern. And I think the biggest reason is they haven't filed for those rate increases. I know the public doesn't like to have those, but they really don't like to have a good service. And they really don't like to have interruptions in their utility infrastructure or their utility, their electric or their water or any of those utilities. So again, I'd say you're probably one of definitely in the top 25% of what I've seen. And you definitely do not want to become one of those horror stories. I have a couple that we're working with, pleading with those communities. You need to increase your rates. You have to, for the sake of just getting your infrastructure put back together and being able to pay your bills timely. So well done to everybody.
Good. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from staff? We have Chris here tonight. Thank you for coming. And I don't see any hands up at all, so I guess that's a good thing. I understand we have a clean opinion again this year.
You do, yeah. You've received an unmodified opinion for both the city and the utilities, which is also known as a clean opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we can provide as your audit firm. And one of the things we didn't talk about is you also have the audit results letter. Most of that communication are required communications. We'll talk about journal entries. Go ahead, I'm sorry. We'll talk about journal entries. It'll go into some of the management representations, your accounting policies. So if you haven't, I urge you to take a look at that letter to see some of the required communications that we discuss as your audit firm. I just know there's nothing, if you were to compare that to prior years, there's nothing, I guess, significant or unusual that would pop out. For the most part, it's a pretty straight, pretty much a required communications, and then touches on the internal controls for your organization, which concentrate again on the size of your entity, right? In a perfect world, you probably have 4 or 5, 6, 7 different accountants. You could have perfect segregation of the duties. So this points out some of those items. But where you can, you put in complementary controls to take the place of some of those segregation of duty issues. So again, no significant findings within that letter. And I'll ask Amanda too if there's anything else she wanted to add to that discussion.
No, I think nothing to add from my perspective. Our team is fairly new to the city, I will say, and I would say, things are in good order. Good financial staff and knows what's going on, is very helpful, and can answer our questions when the audit comes around. So that's always very helpful as we're trying to get through things and with the least amount of pain to the financial staff. So really appreciate all of that. I think that just goes to say that you're hiring good managers, and your financial information is reliable, during the course of the year, not just after the auditors come through. So that is that should be comforting to you as the council.
Well, we certainly appreciate your comments on our staff. We're very fortunate to have a good staff that's very conscientious, and we're glad that they're keeping up with all of the different requirements. It certainly isn't easy today. They keep throwing more stuff at us, but we appreciate the work and certainly the clean opinion. Anybody have any comments or questions of the auditors? If not, the chair will entertain a motion to accept the audit report as presented.
I'll move that we accept the audit report as presented. I'll second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. We appreciate the fine report and the work of staff. Keep up the good work. And thank you for chiming in tonight.
All right, thanks all. Appreciate the relationship and the confidence you put in us as your auditors, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, that wasn't dry enough for everybody, let me tell you. Part of the problems and deliberations and requirements that we go through, but it is nice that we're in the top 25%. Moving on to new business, item B, the mayor hereby appoints Donna Hahn to the revolving loan committee, and we need confirmation with that. So the chair will entertain a motion to approve Donna Hahn to the revolving loan fund committee.
I make a motion to appoint Donna Hahn to the revolving loan fund committee.
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Moving on to item C, approval of contract with Kapoor Engineering for utility capacity study. Tim, why don't you give us a brief summary on that, please?
Sure. So Plymouth Utilities previously completed sanitary studies in 1996 and 2003. These studies serve as kind of baseline for the update of this upcoming study. As we've heard at the last meeting with the closure of TID number 4 and including our ad hoc committee, and developers were getting questions on what infrastructure is going to be needed. You know, are we going to need lift stations in various locations? Are there areas of concerns with our sewer infrastructure? And right now, we don't have the answers to those, so this study is going to provide us some guidance for developers, for our ad hoc committee, and for others. So we got a quote from Kapoor, our engineering firm, to complete this study. They're going to look at 7 areas of potential need. Those are highlighted on the map in the study. This isn't a budgeted project, however, the Sanitary Utility Operating Fund has capacity to fund this project.
Thank you. The chair will entertain a motion so we can discuss.
I'll move to approve the service agreement with Kapoor in the amount of $19,800.
Second that.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Clerk, go ahead, John.
You know, we, at our ad hoc housing committee, Kathy came in and showed us some maps of the whole area where sewer services may be adequate and where it may not be adequate to put housing. So this is really important so that we do the right thing in the right places. So, I appreciate it.
Good, thank you. Roll call, please.
Herman,
Yes.
Mattsdorf,
Yes.
Shilsky,
Yes.
Penkwitz,
Yes.
Gilson,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Yes.
Motion carried, thank you. Item D, approval of contract with CertaPro Painters for pool epoxy flooring. Tim, you want to give us a brief summary on that,
Sure, just a
please?
very brief summary. In 2023, capital improvement funds were budgeted to improve the aquatic center building floors. We received 2 quotes for the work. CertaPro Painters was the low bid. Staff recommends selecting CertaPro Painters in the amount of $26,077.22. Currently, the floor, it was done in 2002. It was a non-slip flooring. It's now basically worn away, and it's very slippery, so this will repair those floors.
Thank you. Chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve certain propaners in the amount of $26,077.22.
I'll second that.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Doesn't seem like it was 2002. Wow, that's a long time ago. I thought it was later than that. Lasts a long time. Okay. We have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Hildebrand,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Penkwitz,
Yes.
Mattsdorf,
Yes.
Gilson,
Yes.
Shilsky,
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
Motion carried, thank you. Moving on to item 7, resolution number 13, a resolution of the City of Plymouth accepting a portion of the road right-of-way known as South Pleasant View Road in the City of Plymouth, parcel 592718200967. Tim, you want to give us a brief summary on that, please?
Sure. So in the last month, a representative of Champion Title Services on behalf of Bank First, which is formerly Dairy State Bank, contacted us to let us know of a parcel that is owned by the bank, but is actually road right-of-way. At some point when the parcel and subdivision was created, it looks like it was probably missed. So this is really city property with the road and sidewalk on there that we would maintain. So staff recommends a resolution number 13, accepting the portion of road right-of-way known as South Pleasant View Road in the City of Plymouth, contingent on a signature from the bank representative. They have the document. They're going to be signing it shortly. Crystal, any additions from your perspective on this one?
No, I think you've got it covered.
Perfect.
Thank you. I understand this would be a quick claim deed?
Quickly, indeed. Yes.
Thank you. Chair will entertain a motion so we can discuss.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 13, as stated.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Gilson,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Hildebrand,
Yes.
Herman,
Yes.
Mattsdorf,
Yes.
Shilsky,
Yes.
Penkwitz.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. For just a little note here, we're going to go into a closed session on several items, and when we come out, we will have a vote on that. So we'll ask some people to clear the room in order to conduct our closed session. So with that, Chair will entertain a motion to go into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, paren 1, paren B. Okay, we're back on, for the record, we're back in open session. Chair will entertain motions on any closed session items, and let's go to the Walmart claim first.
I'll move that we
Hire,
hire the Mandretti Appraisal Group for Mr. Mandretti to do our appraisals from this time forward, and
With city administrator,
with
or
the city administrator.
our attorney, sorry.
City attorney given the ability to sign contracts.
correct. Diana, second.
Okay.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. 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 Motion carried. Next item is the claim from Chris Bruner. Chair will entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to
Alderman
approve the claim
Hildebrand.
from Chris Brenner.
Second.
We have a first and a second to approve the claim from Chris Brenner. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. And our last item is pursuant to the employment contract of City Administrator, Utility Manager Tim Blakesley. According to contract, council needs to approve a pay increase according to the contract. Chair will entertain a motion to do so.
I'll move that we do so. Second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I have a motion.
Make motion to adjourn.
We have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. We're